Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is Future Royal Soldier Combat. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to support the work of Astral Club and Astral Projection, all you have to do is go down to the description and become a member of Patreon. When you join, you get advanced episodes and a nice chat function, access to some episodes that you can download onto your podcast app. And if you're interested, once again, it's down in the description. Just click on the link. Next up, astral projection lessons. If you'd like to learn to astral project or increase your current abilities, be glad to work with you. I've worked with students now from all over the world. And we've had some good successes. So if you're interested, just go down to the description and send me an email asking for further information. A number of people ask me to go back to that future possible life, a few hundred years in the future, where the U.S. isn't quite what it used to be. As I know, I was a member of a Royal U.S. Guard, and or at least a candidate. I was a member of the Guard, and I was going to be an officer candidate. But before I could, I had to serve in the Guard as an enlisted. It was just what you had to do. You couldn't be an officer without proving yourself as an enlisted. And I had a friend there whose name was Pedro. I don't think I mentioned his name last time. And I pulled a little trick. I grabbed what I thought was just basically a grenade, and I wanted to test it. I threw it in the river, and instead of the explosion I was expecting, the whole river blew up. And that was a little bit surprising, and I kind of played a little bit of a trick on my buddy, and I took his blast grenade or whatever they call it. I'm not sure what they called it. And I took it. So I knew, though, that they'd do an inspection, but he wouldn't be blamed because he had three female. He was quite the Casanova. He had three female witnesses with him out on the veranda that could testify that he had nothing to do with it. But after that occurred, shortly thereafter, I ended up being sent back to my body. And really what I remember, because I usually have limited access to the mind of the body that I'm borrowing, which is my future self. And I know there was some sort of chaos, some sort of revolution going on, and it led to a chaotic situation such that some general decided to come and reestablish order and ended up declaring himself an emperor of the United States. And so we all had the seal of the United States on our helmets. The only difference was the eagle had a royal crown. That made me a little nervous when I got back. I mean, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. That's with a small r, people. Look it up in Google with a small r. I'm not a royalist. So that made me a little sad, I guess, that's what might happen in the future. But some folks wanted to know a little bit more. So I decided to give it a shot and see if I could go back, hopefully somewhere around the time, not too long after my first experience, because I had a basic ident. So it's a lot easier to go back now than it was perhaps the first time. So I did concentrate, left my body, and then I willed myself to that future ident. The next thing I knew, and this was a little jarring, you have to understand, when you suddenly kind of wake up in a new body, and especially when you're walking. I was dressed in full combat gear, and I was walking towards the armored bus that had brought us to this beat-up old tourist destination. And so I tripped a little bit, and I quickly grabbed myself so I didn't fall over. But it didn't help that a second later, somebody hit me in the back of my head. And, I felt it because it hurt. And I looked around, and there was Pedro, my friend, who I, kind of framed, but I knew he'd be okay. And he was like, I know it was you, you washout puta. And I just kind of laughed and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, yeah, okay. We're going to have a talk after this mission. I was like, whatever. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. And he goes, he said to me, you're lucky we're simpatico, or else I'd have turned you in a minute. And I said, hey, you do whatever you need to do, buddy. I don't know what you're talking about. He just kind of gave me this half smirk and said, okay, we'll talk. We'll talk when this mission's over. I said, sure, whatever. So we all boarded the bus. And just to kind of remind you, I mean, this thing looked like a tank in the form of a bus. There was only one door that we all went in, but I could tell as I was walking in that there were recessed doors along the side of the bus, at least the side that I could see. And which would make sense if you're using it as some sort of a tactical weapon, because that way, if you had to get off the bus quickly, you didn't want to all be funneled through one opening. I mean, it's obvious why you wouldn't want to be funneled out one opening. One guy, with a machine gun could wipe you out. So you'd want to have other modes of extraction. But that was just my feeling, because I was mostly in control of the body at this point. And when you're mostly in control, you're somewhat limited to what you can access in the other person's mind. It's kind of a delicate dance, really. So we all got on the bus, and I took a seat. And as I was sitting there, just kind of mulling over what kind of future life this I might be getting myself into, this beautiful Latina soldier sat down next to me. And I could tell that her name was Gabriela. She was beautiful. She was about 5'8", and she had this lovely black hair that was done up. A nice light tan skin color. Her eyes were beautiful and dark. She just had this wonderful feeling about her. And I could sense the panic inside me from my other self. I'm no ladies' man myself, but I could tell I was better than this guy was. If only because I've got a little bit more experience than he does. So I decided to do him a little favor, because I sensed that he always clammed up whenever women were around, women soldiers or whatever. So I looked at her, and she kind of gave me a smile, and I said, Gabriela, you are looking beautiful and fierce today. And she looked shocked at first, and then she had this big smile on her face. And she said, oh, you're not looking too bad yourself. So I didn't have to say another word. She just started talking. And I was thinking inwardly to myself, you're welcome, buddy. I figured at least I could do right is, since I'm kind of taking over his body for periods of time, at least I could give him a little bit of a gift, because she was, in our language, smoking hot. So I figured that, hopefully he'll run with the ball at this point in time, so that I can do my future self a little bit of a favor. So we all get on the bus, and everybody's settled in, and we start rolling. And I know the mission, I have a rough idea as I kind of try to probe the thoughts of my future self. And it's difficult because it's a balancing act once again. You don't want to bring him to the fore, but you want to get some information. And what I got is, it was just a mission that we were hunting down these rebels, and we had some intel on where their base was. Evidently, there was some sort of aerial intel that had spotted their base in the woods. So we were on the way there, I guess, to ruin their party. I'd say we were rolling along for about, oh, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, when all of a sudden there was these loud explosions. And I could see on the monitors, because remember, the bus was all armored. The only way we could see outside was there was monitors all over the place. And I could see on one of the monitors that there had been a bunch of explosions that had taken these large trees and they had fallen down onto the road. And immediately the bus started taking small arms fire. Someone must have hit a button or something, because all these combat stations came down from the ceiling, and there was a monitor and an interface that you could operate. Well, I didn't know what to do, so I backed off and allowed him to come to the fore, my future self, because he knew what to do. He just went right onto that station and started looking through the monitor. And it was easy. I probably could have done it, because the AI or whatever picked out all the targets in his area of view, and it had them all outlined, even though they were hiding all over the place. I don't know if it was using some sort of thermal imaging or some sort of advanced intelligence picking out these human targets. And then all he had to do was literally just pull a trigger. And within 2 seconds, all of these bursts of blaster fire went out, like little streaks of light. And everybody fell down that was on the monitor. I was thinking, wow, that was pretty darn efficient. And there was a number of other of these combat stations that came down too, all throughout the bus. So I assumed everyone else was pretty much doing the same. It probably wasn't more than 5 minutes, although it seemed a little bit longer to me. But it was probably about 5 minutes when someone shouted out, "Clear." And I was right. All of a sudden, all of these doors opened up on the sides of the bus, and everybody streamed out, whatever door was closer to them, with their blasters in hand. Now, I remember I showed you how much smaller the blasters were, about half the size of an AR-15, let's say, or an M16. But it was light because there wasn't the power pack attached to it. We all had our power packs that were now attached to the bottom of our rifles, which made it a good deal heavier. So I guess what I had seen earlier was just half of this particular weapon. The power pack was, what gave it the ammo that it fired, which was some sort of plasma balls, whatever. Anyway, we all streamed out, and I still kind of let him in the lead, although I was still kind of watching and keeping a certain amount of control. But he just walked around looking at the various, dead rebels. They all looked like they were stitched right on up the middle with these black burn marks. I mean, they didn't stand a chance. They were all of the ones that I looked at were dead. I mean, I felt badly for these people, but I could tell it was for him, it was just a job, and they were just rebels, so he didn't really care all that much, which also kind of disappointed me a little bit, but it is what it is. Then one of the other soldiers, the guards, shouted out that we got a live one. And we all kind of went over. And apparently, this guy, I guess he must have taken a blast to the side of his head, and then he fell down. So he wasn't stitched up. And I guess he was coming to, because the soldier was kicking him. And I guess they're not much into, gentleness here. So eventually he comes to, and he looked up at us, and you could just tell he was not feeling his best day. So, we kicked him a few more times, I guess, and he got up. And the whole idea was, okay, you're going to lead us now to this base. So we left the bus there with just a couple guards. And then the rest of us started following this guy up some trail. And my buddy Pedro was basically taking point, but this guy, the rebel, was in front of Pedro, obviously leading the way. I was back some meters from Pedro, and then everybody else was in line behind me. I guess it was probably because we were kind of the two OCS type of candidates, so we were in control of this unit. So everybody just kind of formed up behind us. Everybody kept their interval, so that hasn't changed too much. Everybody left, good couple meters from the back of the guard in front of them, because you don't want to walk into an ambush all bunched up. And especially since we had just gotten through an ambush, we were on extra alert. Now, Pedro was operating some sort of I believe it was a metal kind of mine detector. And so he was using this thing and following along and keeping an eye on the rebel at the same time. So we were proceeding up this path, and, it was just a lot of scrub brush and some trees, nothing much to report on. When we came to this sharp turn in the path, we're talking a sharp left. And Pedro, I think, was paying a little bit too much attention to his scanner, looking for mines or anything like that. And he didn't notice, although I did, that the rebel, instead of being in the middle like he was before, along with all of us, he kind of gently moved off to the left, right before the left bend. And I saw that, and I immediately shouted out to Pedro, "Pedro, stop." But it was too late. He stepped on something. Now, I accessed the memory of my guy, and I know these rebels would use a wooden container that had some sort of a pressure sensor and some sort of a radio device that evidently we had trouble detecting with this particular device. So Pedro stepped on this thing, it sent a message out, and there was an explosive on a tree right across from Pedro, and it directed the blast right out towards Pedro, just knocking him over in a heap. Well, I ran up and to examine Pedro, while somebody else grabbed the rebel and made sure he wasn't going anywhere. And Pedro, he just looked up at me. And, there was blood everywhere. There's blood coming out of his mouth. It was... I could tell that my future self, as well as myself, was just feeling awful and sorrow. He tried to say something, and it just bubbled a little bit from his mouth. I couldn't tell what it was. And then his eyes just... He passed. At that stage, I felt this rage coming from inside my future self. And I tried to pull it back, but I just couldn't, because my future self just seized control. All I could do was watch. And he ran up to that rebel who was being guarded, knocked him in the head with the butt of his blaster. The guy fell down, and then my future self took the barrel and put it right against his forehead and told him he was going to air out his brain case. And he was about to pull that trigger. I was exerting all of my will, trying to get control back. And I managed to reach him, and I just shouted the message, "Don't, we need him to find the base. Don't do it." And then some other soldiers ran up and said the same thing. And he just, or I, it's so confusing, eased his finger off the trigger because it was partially depressed, but not enough. And he just eased off. And you could see the relief in the rebel's face. Well, I don't know whether it was my future self or it was me, but one of us kicked him in the face and bloodied up his nose some. And then we grabbed him by the, by his jacket and yanked him up. And just told him to keep going. And that if he tried another trick like that, we'd scrap him. And that's a weird term. I've never used that in this context. I think that term came from my future self. Scrap him. Any rate, the rebel got the message, and he took us the rest of the way. And when I could see, we were, a number of meters away from what I could tell was a camouflage base. I had one of the soldiers get this guy to kneel down and stick her blaster in his mouth and tell him. She told him that if he said a word, she'd pull the trigger. This rebel, he got the message. He got the message because I know he's left some blood along the trail, and I think there was a couple of teeth too that he left as well. I didn't feel bad. Actually, neither of us felt bad about that after the death of our friend. We stormed the place in a half circle. They never saw us coming, and we scrapped the whole lot of them. It was weird, but I felt less bad now about their deaths than I did about the other ones. I guess that's just, it's probably the evolution of combat, isn't it? You become desensitized or you become emotionally attached to the situation. I could feel that I was losing control once again. I could feel the shocks now that were becoming more and more painful to me. And so I had to abandon this possible future body. And after all of this, I was not sad to leave it all behind. Then I woke up and wrote down a whole bunch of notes trying to capture everything. And it just feels weird mourning the death of a friend that probably won't be born for another couple 100 years. It's a very weird feeling. Very conflicted right now, very conflicted. At any rate, if you liked that episode, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already, and my goodness, 85% of you have subscribed already. I know the average on YouTube is 10% subscription, so you guys are amazing. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit it. I mean, you got nothing to lose, and you'll get notified if the YouTube gods are kind whenever future episodes pop up. Please leave me your comments and questions. I know I didn't get the back history that some folks wanted. Maybe I'll go back again and try to get that. Please understand, there was a lot going on this time. So there wasn't a lot of time for reflection or trying to access his deep memories. When the bullets are flying or the plasma, balls are flying, you don't have a lot of time to search historic knowledge. At any rate, comments and questions, always love them. And this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.